Welcome to One Interview, One World. This is Lainey Kay, and this is a show about interviewing people from all walks of life because everyone has a story to share and we can all learn from each other. I hope you enjoy listening. So today I'm with Kristen Vande Bossche, and she is a certified financial planner. She also has her securities. What do you call it? Securities what?
We just call it our securities licenses, our Series
Securities
7
license.
and 66 is the technical terms.
Okay. So thank you so much for being here today, Kristen. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So I'd love for you to give me a little background about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So, well, I guess starting way back, I pretty much grown up almost my whole life in Southern California and in North Orange County, Yorba Linda area. After graduating high school, I actually worked for Corporate Bank of America in the loss mitigation department, actually, for them on the loan side of things. And I went to business school after that at Washington State University and really found and developed my love for business. And after graduating, I joined my family asset management practice. And from there, let's see, I got married in 2018. And at the end of 2019, we welcomed our first child together, Brooks. And yeah, I mean, the rest is kind of history. It's where I am today.
Beautiful. So you work with your family in a financial planning office, then I take it?
Yes, yeah. So well, I guess, gosh, what was that? Almost 20 years ago, my dad started a firm. Really, it's more like I said, kind of an asset management firm. An investment specialist is how they were brought on. They're actually contracted through Northwestern Mutual, which is largely known as an insurance company, but they were brought on. My dad's team was brought on as an investment specialist group. So separately contracted. So it is his own business, but kind of attached to Northwestern Mutual. So I started working for them about 8 years ago now. My mom actually started right from the ground floor too, about 20 years ago. So my mom, my dad kind of started the business together. I came on about 8 years ago, like I said, and then my brother joined 3 years ago as an analyst. And then we have a couple of other employees as well. But yeah, my entire immediate family. So,
Wow. So what your dad, you said 20, has he been doing it 20 years or he was doing it even longer?
well, he actually, he was a career changer. So growing up, we kind of moved all over the place. I said, for the most part, I grew up in Southern California, but before my dad started this business, we were actually kind of all over the place during my the very younger periods of my life. He actually was, he was like VP of sales for a paper company. So I think it was Scott Paper, then Kimberly Clark bought them. So, really large companies. But it brought us kind of everywhere. I mean, we lived in Ohio, Washington, Arizona, traveling a bunch. And then he separated from service about, I guess it would be about 22 years ago. And he went through this very in-depth process, kind of like a fact-finding process where it really kind of connected him with what does he want to do now? Because here he is in his early 40s, still lots of life and good working years ahead of him. So he has always had like a very entrepreneurial spirit, and he's always been passionate about finance. So he started working with his financial advisor, and really excelled at it. In a matter of about 2 years, decided to go on his own, and that's when he kind of created his own team. He got a partner with a little bit more experience, and they started their own business, and they shopped around and decided to partner kind of with Northwestern Mutual as, like I said, the investment specialist group. And they've been here ever since.
How about that?
Yeah.
And then were you always interested in financial planning yourself?
Gosh, I always envied those people that knew exactly what they wanted to do, like from a younger age. I'd have friends and even middle school, like, I'm gonna be a nurse, like my mom. I never had that. I really didn't. Math, I always liked numbers. Numbers are so like black and white. There's kind of a right or wrong answer, and that always really appealed to me. It wasn't until I really I guess, got my first job in the financial services industry. So when I graduated high school was in '08, and that was the, the great financial crisis.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know, kind of a crazy time, but and as with any recession, just like the one that we experienced, technically earlier this year, opportunities always arise, and there's always pockets of the economy that now are hiring like crazy to mitigate whatever sort of economic fallout is happening. So at that time, Bank of America was hiring like crazy in their loss mitigation department. So when I got that job as an 18-year-old working for corporate America, my job was to take budget information from folks, and my goal was to pre-qualify them for home loans. So I would input all of their financial data. I would take a deep look at their budget and kind of problem solve at what kind of, principal and interest payment or repayment plan I could set them up on. That's when I really kind of, I kind of got passionate about it. And then after going through business school, I really became passionate about it. And I think it's the fact that it's so useful to everybody, no matter where you lie on kind of the spectrum of, net worth. Financial planning information is something that we all need. We all need financial literacy. So, that's kind of where I would say my passion was born. But no, I didn't always want to become a financial planner by any stretch of the imagination, actually.
Yeah. So what kind of education do you have to get to become like a certified financial planner?
Yeah. So, in order to be a CFP, so a certified financial planner, you have to have a bachelor's degree.
Okay.
Doesn't need to be in business. It doesn't need to be in finance, but you just have to have that 4-year degree. That's one of the credentials, or one of the criteria, I should say. You have to, it's a real world applicable designation, meaning that you have to be working in the field. You can't just graduate from college and say, I'm going to be a CFP. You actually have to have 3 years of full-time experience working in the field before you can attach yourself, or I should say attach those letters to yourself. And then you have to, through a college, go through 6 courses. They're kind of the financial planning milestone courses. And it's, it's been a while for me, but well, first and foremost, it's the financial landscape is one of them. So the financial planning environment and landscape is one course. Then you have to take a course on insurance or risk management, taxes, estate planning, retirement planning, and investments. And then you have a 7th kind of capstone course where you get the CFP board assigns you 2 hypothetical clients with all of their different, not issues, but scenarios, you could say, about their finances and their different goals. And you have to construct a comprehensive financial plan for them. And you have to present that then to the board, the CFP board, because the CFP is a national designation. So there's a national board. So you present it to a board member. Once you get the final pass from them, you then sit for a cumulative exam. And the exam used to be a 2-day long exam. They've condensed it into 1 day. It's all computerized now. And then if you pass that lovely 6-hour exam, then you are a CFP. And it opens up kind of a lot of doors, I would say, in this industry. You don't, a lot of times you don't have to be a CFP. I'm the only CFP on my team here. But it really allows us to specialize in financial planning and retirement.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And then you also have a securities license. So can you explain what that is?
Yeah. So if you are in so starting off in this business, in order to even be able to talk to a client about a security or a stock, like if the word Tesla or whatever, name any sort of publicly traded company were to come out of my mouth when talking to a client, I have to basically legally have a securities license. And what that is that's another nationally regulated type of license. And it allows you to give advice specifically to securities. So it goes through a very in-depth course. Oftentimes, there's different condensed courses, and I think I did kind of a fast track one, but it's months of studying. But you're not going through necessarily like a specific college like you would with your CFP. And you have to take a cumulative exam for that as well. It's another 6-hour exam. Once you pass that, that goes through all of the kind of, I would say, the definitions of securities and kind of all of the background on it. And then if you pass your 7, you then have to take the legal aspect of the securities world. You have to take a test that only deals with the legal aspects of it. And that's the 66. And that is a little bit less studying. It's a little bit less coursework. I actually would argue it's a harder test. It's about a 2-hour test. Once you get your Series 7 and your 66, then you can give advice on securities. You can technically, be a broker of sorts, and that someone can come to you and say, I want to buy this, and you can kind of stand ready to receive those orders.
Okay. So a lot of people may not even know what a security means.
Yeah. It's a very good point. So when I say securities, what I'm really talking about is individual stocks of companies. So publicly traded companies, Apple. If you own a share of Apple, that's technically called a security. So if you have multiple shares of different companies in your account, all of those in our world are technically called securities.
Okay.
So they're just kind of synonymous with stock.
Right. Okay. Perfect. And then can you explain the stock market? Because I think a lot of people, that's a really good question. I don't even know if you know, like how many or what's the percentage of people in America who invest in the stock market?
Gosh, that's such a good question. I don't happen to know the percentage of it. The people that are, what brings kind of or what makes the stock market more available to most consumers or American citizens is oftentimes through an employer-sponsored plan. So through like a 401k, you can invest in the stock market. You kind of asked, what is the stock market? And a lot of times when people say the market, they're really referring to like the S&P 500. That is the most widely kind of used and referenced indice or market in America here domestically. And what that is comprised of is actually technically 499 of our largest publicly traded companies here in the US. So the S&P 500, what it actually is when people refer to the market, and you might see it on your phone, what it's doing on a daily basis, it's actually tracking. It's comprised of all 499 of those shares of those companies in that index. So oftentimes, especially when people are starting out in their investing kind of experience, the best way to invest is by using like a mutual fund. I wouldn't generally suggest that people start off with like securities if they want to invest in kind of the stock market. I would suggest that they start out with mutual funds, and that's most commonly what you're going to find in your employer-sponsored plan or a 401k. So most people, even if they're like automatically enrolled into the plan, they might be, which happens now with a lot of plans, they're investing in the stock market and they might not even necessarily be aware of it. But what mutual funds are, is they're actually a basket of securities or stocks. So what it allows people to do is enter into the stock market and invest in the stock market at a much cheaper price. You can buy a share of a mutual fund for maybe $30-$40, whereas if you want to buy a share of Tesla, it might be $600. Yeah. So it's a lower cost entry point into the overall market, and then you technically have little bits of shares.
Yeah.
So when I hear people say, what is the market? Oftentimes they're kind of referring to the S&P 500. So that's always kind of my explanation.
Okay.
Of what it
is. What is the NASDAQ? That is, or I'll tell you what I think it is.
Okay.
The NASDAQ, I think, is more technical companies.
You're 100% right. So the NASDAQ, so when you look at, and I kind of said the S&P 500 is one of the most widely referenced indexes in our US market. We really have 3 very well-known indexes in our US large cap market. That's the NASDAQ, as you said, the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones. Okay. The S&P 500 is the most comprehensive, and you're actually going to find tech companies in there as well. You're going to find companies in all 11 sectors of the economy represented in the S&P 500. The Dow Jones is just about our 30 biggest companies. So it's not necessarily very representative of the market, although it is a widely followed index.
Okay.
The third one consists of much more companies, and that is the NASDAQ, but they're all tech companies.
Okay.
So you are exactly right. All high-tech digital companies.
Do you know how many are in there?
Oh gosh, I want to say, and these indices do change on a quarterly basis a lot of times, but God, I want to say there's over 1,000.
Okay.
There's a good amount of companies in the NASDAQ.
Okay. And then is the NASDAQ located in a different location? Like, is the S&P and the Dow kind of New York, and is NASDAQ like in a different, like, I don't know, like California or something like that?
Yeah, well, that's funny you should say that, because I mean, you know, if you were to kind of mentally associate the NASDAQ, you probably would associate it with like Silicon Valley, right? Like here in California, but they're all traded out of New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Yeah. So another thing that I've learned is, like you say, like if you invest in like one company, like that's a lot riskier than investing in the mutual fund, or having like a certified financial planner doing a plan for you, which you would have some mutual funds, but you might have individual companies, but it's more of like a well-rounded plan where your money's spread out and you don't have as much risk. That's what that means. I'm taking it.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, there's a couple of things there that you said. You know, we manage retirement assets. So we are managing people's retirement nest eggs. So one of kind of the fundamental pieces of our philosophy is diversification. You know, you talk to folks and it's like, what do you want with your retirement assets? What is the goal? You obviously, most folks want and need long-term growth, but you also kind of want and need stability as well. So they kind of don't maybe mentally go hand in hand, but they do through a process of fully diversifying yourself. So you're right in the sense that if you choose to just buy individual securities, you're inherently going to lack some diversification there, unless you have, you know, what would probably take at least a couple $1 million to fully properly diversify yourself using individual funds. And again, that's because individual funds individual stocks have a much higher cost of entry. You know, Apple might be $400 depending on the day. Tesla might be $600. It's a much more costly way to diversify yourself, but it is possible if you have a really good sized chunk of money that most people, 99.9% of people, don't have. So then the best way to diversify yourself and to kind of give yourself that element of downside protection is using mutual funds. So I always kind of liken it to, and we kind of learned this. We learned it during every sort of recession that we've gone through in this country, but certainly during 08, 09, the great financial crisis, we really learned as a nation that there is no such thing as too big to fail. We saw very big and very strong financial institutions go under. So when you invest in an individual security or individual stock, do you have the potential of your money going to zero? Theoretically, yes. It might be very unlikely if you're investing in something like an Amazon or an Apple, but is it possible? Yes, it is. When you're investing in a mutual fund, and say you buy a mutual fund that's just designed to mirror the S&P 500 index, so it just holds a share of all those 499 companies. Do you have the potential for your money to go to zero? I would say not really, because you're investing in the economy, right? So if your money went to zero with an S&P 500 fund, that means that all of our largest publicly traded companies in this country went out of business. That is like an Armageddon type situation. Your money doesn't mean anything at that point anyways. That is a whole lot less likely than an actual individual company going out of business. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about retirement funds, that diversification and spreading yourself out amongst our biggest, and most financially solvent companies, that's imperative for those funds. Now, in the financial planning process, like you kind of referenced with having a comprehensive plan done, oftentimes when I work with clients, for the bulk of their retirement portfolio, we have a very diversified, well allocated strategy for their nest egg. But oftentimes, I would say, honestly, most of my clients will have like a little bit of money on the side sometimes where they do invest in individual securities. And that is okay. That's your prerogative as an investor. And if you're passionate about a certain company, or say you want to buy your employer stock too, there are kind of qualifications I would give around that. But so long as the bulk of your assets are invested properly and well diversified, that's okay. And that's all really part of kind of the comprehensive plan. A comprehensive plan would really address all of that.
Okay. What would you say to a person that's, getting their first full-time job and they're offered like the 401k, or, how should they go about, being involved in that? And, I know some of them don't feel like, oh, I can't afford to do that. I don't want to invest in this right now. Or they don't even feel like they're too young to start saving.
100%. Yeah. I unfortunately, I even hear it from some of folks that I know on a personal basis too, in my life, whether it's younger friends or whatever. I don't need to think about retirement savings right now. That's the most common one. But I also do hear what you're saying too. I can't afford it, I work a lot on the 401k side of things. Like before we started our interview here, we were talking about how I work with businesses. It's about 35 to 40% of what I do is I work directly with companies, and I sit as an advisor to their 401k plan. So I am on a regular basis talking to people who are just getting their first full-time job. They've never seen a 401k. They've never been in one. And oftentimes I help with the plan structure and set it up. And a lot of times these plans are set up with automatic enrollment. And they even have like an auto escalation feature where participants would, sometimes unbeknownst to them, there are notices being sent out though. They just choose to ignore them. Their contributions are even going up every single year kind of in the background. When I go to these different offices and I do my presentations, my investing seminars, I will always ask folks, did you notice that your contributions went up by 1% in January? I overwhelmingly get a no. Increasing or even contributing to your 401k, even if it's a 1% contribution rate, you're oftentimes not even going to notice it. A lot of times, depending on what your pay is, that might be 20 to 40 bucks a paycheck. Okay, so we're talking about maybe skipping like 4 trips to Starbucks. The most important thing when it comes to investing and saving for retirement is time spent in the market. So it doesn't mean that you need to, really kill yourself over trying to see how much you can save, and you have to get in at 20% right off the bat. A lot of us live in Southern California. It's hard as far as the cost of living is high here. But start something, start that habit. It's going to make saving later on in your life so much less painful. There are studies, and of course we have to go through them in the process of doing what I do. There are hundreds of studies out there that show that if you were to skip your 20s, defer saving for retirement until your 30s, even if you were to double your contribution, there's times where you will never be able to make up for that. The beauty of compounding interest is the longer time you spend in the market, the longer your contributions are in the market, the more money you're gonna earn. So even if it's a little bit, start it now. I promise you will have to do less work on the back end, and you'll be very happy that you did it. And you likely won't even miss that $20 coming out of your paycheck. The other thing I'd like to always make folks, aware of as they're starting out their careers, and if they have access to an employer plan, check out what your match is. If your employer, oftentimes employers offer a match into your 401k, but oftentimes you as the employee have to contribute a certain amount to get that match. So like very commonly, I will see, a safe harbor match of 4%, where an employer requires the employee to contribute 5% of their salary. And if they do that into their 401k, and if they do that, they will then match them 4% on top of that. That's 9% going into your 401k. That's excellent. Think of that match as part of your compensation. If you're not contributing enough to at least get your employer match, you're leaving money on the table. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's a really good point. What do you recommend is a good savings percent each month? What should be the aim?
Yeah, I mean, I get this question a lot, and you know, when it comes to retirement, I will say that there is like no one size fits all. You know, oftentimes when I'm doing seminars, people will say, well, I heard if you have $1 million, you can retire. Maybe. For some people, that's more than enough. For some people, that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface. What it really matters is, what it really depends on is your other assets. Most importantly, your cost of living. So what your lifestyle looks like, what kind of lifestyle you're looking to maintain. And then you back into your savings from there. But obviously, I can't intimately know everyone's financial situation. So just some good general benchmarks. Oftentimes in financial planning, we'll hear the 20-60-20 rule referenced. And what that refers to is 20% right off the bat should be designated of your income. So 20-60-20 all pertains to your income. 20% right off the bat should be saved. Okay, so 20% of your income should be saved on a regular basis per pay period. 60% should be spent on fixed expenditures. So we're talking housing, food, utilities, car payments, etc. And 20% should be spent on discretionary, expenses. So entertainment, obviously that looks a whole lot different in 2020, but in a normal year, going to the theater, I don't know, going to restaurants, bars, 20% should be designated to that. So 20% is kind of the ideal savings target, but not all of that should be for retirement. Because, one of your if you're just starting out your career and your kind of adult life, one of your very first savings goals should be to have an emergency fund set up. So not all of your savings, if you are hitting that 20%, if you are, that's amazing, good for you. But not all of that should be going into your 401k. You should make sure that you have emergency savings or that rainy day fund filled. Generally, a lot of studies will go to show that if you're starting out your career, you're in your 20s, if you consistently save anywhere from, say, 11 to 15% into your 401k, consistently throughout your working career, you should theoretically be set for retirement. You should be set to replace a good portion of your income in retirement. So that leaves maybe another 5% or maybe 10%, depending on, what your other assets and goals look like, that should be going into other savings, like cash savings, or maybe you're saving for a home. But so I kind of like to give two broad benchmarks. 20%, although that's a very high one for people to hit, especially here living in California, but kind of keep it in your mind, 20%. And then anywhere from that 11 to 15% should be specifically for retirement.
Okay. And then the rainy day fund, should that be 6 months? Should that be, well, to me, I feel like minimum 6 months, but the best would be a year. And then, of course, if you could do 2 years of a rainy day fund. So what is your opinion on that?
Yeah. And again, it all kind of boils down to there's no one size fits all. So, and there's differences in different stages of your life. So, broadly speaking, a rainy day fund should theoretically have, for younger people with a lot of earning years ahead of them, a lot of earning capacity, should have anywhere from 3 to 6 months in completely liquid cash reserves. But it's also dependent on your industry. So I work with a lot of my business to business, I should say, is with a lot of architectural firms, actually. And architects are in a more cyclically sensitive part of the economy. So when the housing market goes down, that industry in and of itself kind of goes down a bit. So their income is more variable. And if you have a profession where your income is variable in general, so say a hairdresser, somebody who's living off of mostly commissions are part of their income, then you should be really looking at more towards a 6-month cash reserve, maybe even longer. Oftentimes, if you're starting out, or if you're in the early to mid stages of your career, I wouldn't generally recommend a year's worth of the living expenses saved up. Because what you also don't want to do is create what we call a cash drag on your portfolio. So, really in a perfect world, we want to optimize every single dollar that we get, right? So if we're just starting out in our career, if we're in the mid stages of our career, we have lots of good earning years ahead of us, lots of earning capacity. Maybe we have a more cyclically sensitive job. We have 6 months worth of living expenses saved up, completely liquid cash. If I don't have any other sort of short to mid-term saving goals, I don't need a house, or there isn't some sort of investment project that I need to fund, well, the rest of that cash, anything in excess of 6 months plus, should theoretically be invested to optimize those dollars. So you should be utilizing mutual funds, not just in your 401k. If you have excess cash, in excess of that cash reserve, they should be, for all intents and purposes, invested, that cash, to optimize your portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
But as you enter retirement, or as you near retirement, so my personal clients that I work with that are 5 years to retirement, sometimes a little bit more, the goal is to start building your cash reserve for retirement. And that needs to have more in it. Because what happens in retirement, most Americans, their 401k is going to pretty much make up the bulk of their retirement portfolio. That's going to be providing them the majority of their retirement income. And that should be invested, albeit not, aggressively at that point when you're on the doorstep of retirement, but it should be invested. So when you are now relying on a bucket of invested funds in retirement for your income, you're very, you're subjected to whatever the market does. And on a normal year, we get 3 to 4 pullbacks of decent size in the market. That's healthy market behavior. So what a cash reserve in retirement allows you to do is, when we go through those inevitable bear markets, or those inevitable corrections in the market, and your account might be down 10, 11, 12%, because hopefully it's not invested too aggressively, right? You're not down 40% at the time. But when you're down, sorry, phone's ringing here. When you're down, the last thing that you want to do is be drawing income off of your invested portfolio. So then when your accounts are down, you actually draw from your cash reserve in retirement, so as to not incur permanent wealth depletion on your invested funds. So your cash reserve in retirement really has a whole new meaning to it. And oftentimes for a lot of my clients, that needs to be a minimum of 1 year's worth of living expenses, not just fixed living expenses, discretionary as well, a minimum of 1 year, all the way up to 2 years. And depending on your level of comfort, some people even like to have more cash than that on hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it means different things, these emergency funds and these cash reserves and these savings accounts. They mean different things at different parts or different phases of life.
Yeah.
But 3 to 6 months, and you're just starting out, or like I said, if you're in your mid-earning years, generally it is appropriate.
Okay. What would you say to people who are dealing with like the COVID related job losses, or just in general when things like that happen, you have a job loss or something, some kind of emergency? What are some objectives that people should do with their money and their finances at that point in time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Obviously, it's very timely. That's of course when you'll be very happy if you filled up your emergency savings, right? Depending, a lot of times, often when we go through these recessions or these periods of kind of economic contraction, what's hardest to meet is a lot of our fixed expenses. For most of us, especially in the state of California, your fixed expenses, your regular living expenses, are what makes up the bulk of your budget. A lot of times it's primarily spent on mortgage payments or rent payments. A lot of folks also are saddled with a good amount of student loan debt. So first and foremost, I always advise people to check with their lenders. Check with their lenders, check with their landlords if they're renting, check and see if there's any sort of, moratorium or forbearance program. Certainly going through this last recession, there was a widespread push for that. Just about every sort of lending institution was offering kind of, foreclosure forbearance and a moratorium on, mortgage payments. So always see what is available through your lender. If you had a student loan that was through the government. There was a forbearance on those payments as well. See what is available to you. Specifically as it pertains to COVID and, what has happened this year, Congress passed our largest fiscal package, put it into place in March, April of this year, called the CARES Act. Now, the CARES Act came with a lot of provisions on how you can access retirement funds early. Obviously, I would never want to encourage that. But if you have a 401k or an IRA and you have mounting living expenses that you cannot afford to meet, there are ways that you can now essentially take from your 401k and IRA before the end of the year to fund your living expenses and pay it back, which is huge. I would rather folks go that route and pay themselves back by taking loans or actually distributions at this point. Loans are no longer allowed. Distributions from their 401k or IRA, I'd rather see them do that and pay it back rather than amass a good amount of debt, because that oftentimes is the other option. But really, times like this is where it's so important to have that emergency fund. I really can't say it enough. That's going to be the biggest thing. Also, like I kind of alluded to earlier, every recession comes with its different pockets of opportunity. And I even see it in my own client base. Of course, I've had folks that have lost their job or they've taken a huge hit to their income. Their billable hours have slowed down a ton. But then there's pockets of the economy that are absolutely thriving right now. I have a client in cybersecurity that is crazy busy. He's working 12 to 14 hours days. And I see that consistently, so, we're lucky in America to have this kind of thriving gig economy too. So, if you are temporarily unemployed, there are multiple, different companies that you can kind of contract yourself to, whether it's, Instacart, driving Lyft. And obviously it has to deal with your level of comfort, given that we are going through a pandemic and what you're comfortable doing for work and exposing yourself to. But there are opportunities to make money while you are kind of in this interim phase. And of course, there's more government stimulus coming. It's what's very interesting is this recession in particular, the different economic stats that have come out of it have just been staggering. People's disposable income has actually gone up to pre-pandemic levels. And a lot of that is because of that fiscal package, that CARES package that went into place in Q1, the added unemployment benefits.
Yeah.
I mean, that really saved a lot of Americans. And now we have another fiscal package that just got passed. What was that, 2 nights ago? So, luckily the government is kind of doing what needs to be done by way of, extending out unemployment benefits. But there are other options in this new kind of gig economy that we have to earn a bit of income if you're comfortable with it. And then, of course, if you are in very dire situation and you do need to access funds, that CARES Act also allows for you to access a certain portion of your IRA or 401k without paying penalties, which is huge.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. So I think a lot of people don't even know that, sometimes that they had access or that knowledge, So, and then I would say another thing would be when you lose your job or your amount of income coming in, you have to look at, things that you can stop paying that aren't, important. Like maybe you might cut back on cable or
100%. That is all so important. And, in this day and age, a lot of consumer packages and things that we buy, there's this subscription model based into a ton of it. So I always, just kind of as a rule of thumb, I almost obsessively do it. I don't necessarily recommend this, but check your online banking. I mean, not only is it so important for fraud purposes to make sure that you're looking at just about every single transaction that happens, but check your online banking to see what are you paying for that you're maybe not even using or that you can go without. because I'm sure personally, I know myself, I can go without a lot of the things that I actually have monthly subscriptions to. I don't want to, but I can.
Right.
So
Like
a lot,
and things like that.
yeah. And a lot of times those subscriptions can be a little sneaky. So maybe you're paying for something that you're not even using anymore. So definitely, I would say one of the first stops that you should make, or one of the first things that you should do, is do a thorough inventory of your checking account and your credit cards. If you're using those and kind of paying them off at the end of the month, see where all of your dollars are going. Most people have room in their budget. It's a matter of how much room. And it's also just a really healthy, even if you're working. I mean, as a rule of thumb, I like to do a very deep dive about every quarter where I actually, and this isn't going to be exciting for everyone, but it is a really good exercise to do. I go in, I create a spreadsheet, and I look at all of the categories of my spending, and I average it out for every single category. I'm looking at every single detail on a quarterly basis to see, well, what is my spending trend? Where are these, where can I improve from a budget perspective? And what can I cut out?
Yeah, very good. Yeah, because I think that's probably like the first thing you would ask anybody when you're doing a financial plan is, what is your budget and how is your money being spent? And I think a lot of people just don't do that because you don't want to do it. You don't want to really see where you're spending too much in certain places.
Well, budget is like a bad word to people. Oftentimes when I ask for their budget, sometimes I don't ever hear from them again when I'm looking at new clients. Well, because it's a daunting thing to people, right? Just like you said. It's a daunting thing, but it is the foundation of every single person's financial plan. And whether you actually have a written plan done for you or not, you have a plan, right? You have a plan in place. You're earning income, you're doing X, Y, Z with it. That is a plan. And you're going to retire someday. But that is the absolute crux of everyone's financial plan. You can make, and I see it. I mean, I get the benefit of seeing being very familiar with people's financial situations. I see the income they're bringing in. I oftentimes get to look at their budget. I see what they're saving because oftentimes our team is managing their savings. I have folks that live very well in retirement and are extremely well funded for retirement and never earned more than $100,000 during their working career, during their entire working lives. I have folks that are making upwards of $2 million and have little to show for it. If you do not have any sort of conception or handle on your spending, you will never be able to save enough. We can all spend money, right? You have to have some sort of handle and know where your dollars are going if you are ever going to be on track with your financial planning or your retirement planning goals. And I know I keep going back to the retirement planning piece, but that is the thing that we are all most likely going to do one day. And retirement planning looks so much different than it used to. It used to be kind of described as this three-legged stool where you had Social Security paying you. That was one leg of the stool. You had your employer provided pension. That was the other leg. And then you had a little bit of savings. Oh, and you probably lived 10 years in retirement at that point. So it was a very simple times. But now, Social Security is a little bit shaky. It's a kind of a question mark for a lot of folks. Pensions from private employers are pretty much unheard of at this point. That means that we are now in this era, and we have been, where retirement is on us. And we're all going to do it someday. So that needs to be addressed always. And it should be kind of, it should be at the forefront of all of our financial plans.
Yeah. What would you say that America needs to work on to help teach the young about finances and financial planning? Because it isn't something that's rarely taught or spoken about in the education.
No, it isn't. So where to even start with that, right? Because I mean, America, let's look at it through America's lens, right? Through America's pocketbook. If America, as a culture, as a society, and our school systems, if we had the retirement planning piece alone baked into our school, if kids going through high school and college knew that when they get their career, they have to start saving right away because it is going to all be on them now. Their future employer is not going to pay for their retirement like they used to in decades past. Social Security is a little bit shaky as far as from a Social Security trust fund perspective. If America as a whole did a better job of ingraining that in our school systems, that would be doing future America a favor. Then you're going to have less people on welfare and dependent on America's pocketbooks for these programs. So that first and foremost, and I think that every person, especially in college, you need to know that. You need to know that your retirement savings starts, day one of your career, and that should be important to you. Take advantage of your 401k. How about we teach kids what a 401k is? Teach them what that is. Teach them that that brings investing to their fingertips. And that's huge, but the rainy day fund, that is something that should be taught to high school kids. Savings should actually be taught in elementary school. There should be the concept of spend, save, gift even. There should be those three kind of concepts built in from a young age, and the emergency savings certainly. I think that there's certainly a lot of holes in our school system. I think that there's some things we could go without learning and that maybe are not that important to us. But the financial planning piece is huge. Kids need to learn about managing their income, which is what they're going to be doing for the rest of their lives. And savings is absolutely huge.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have any recommendations for for people to make a budget, or to research more so they can learn about financial planning? Are there books or apps or websites?
Yeah, there are so many good resources out there. There are tons. When I first started in this business, there actually isn't, through Northwestern Mutual, because we are kind of a unique operation, ran through them. There was no kind of handbook or manual to become a certified financial planner. I had to go out and seek all of that knowledge. There is so much information available. We are blessed to live in the era that we live in now, where things are just right at our fingertips. You can Google financial planning. I consistently, because I have the background, and I went through the schooling to become a financial planner, this isn't a program that I have personally done, but I encounter people that have gone through this program so much in my client base, or different folks that I talk to through retirement plans that I work for, 401ks that I work as the advisor to. The Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University, that seems to do such an excellent job of explaining the fundamental basics of financial planning, debt management, saving, investing using mutual funds. This is information that is applicable to every person, no matter what stage of life they're at. And of course, you could follow him on Instagram and do that stuff too. But I'm a big fan of Dave Ramsey because he teaches a lot of the fundamentals that I personally believe are so important to every sort of financial plan, no matter, like I said, what stage of life that you're at. Gosh, I remember growing up reading some really good books like, what was that? Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I think that's by Robert Kiyosaki or something. It's an old book, but it really teaches the fundamentals too of living within your means. Because like I kind of said earlier too, I work with people who make millions of dollars and they're clearly not living within their means. I work with people who are 100% on track for their retirement plan, and they, again, have never made, 6 figures. So what it all boils down to, again, is managing your income. That's a good book to teach you that. Also, The Millionaire Next Door is another one of those really good, long-standing books. All three of those things that I just named, very similar fundamentals. Low to no debt, managing your debt, managing your income, staying consistent with your savings. So those are kind of the three that I always really recommend for people who want to start out and get more information. And then, of course, if you're anything like me, that just spurs more Googling and learning. And, it just kind of, you start one piece at a time. But those are really good starting points for people.
Very good. I'm glad you mentioned all of those. I'm familiar. I didn't do the Dave Ramsey, but I've looked at it. I've definitely read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That's an excellent book.
It's such a good book. I mean, like I said, it's been around forever, but it's just a really good book, and it's an easy read too. It's not, when I first started out in this business, like I said, there wasn't any sort of like official training program to do this. I had to seek out all the knowledge so I would get all of these different financial planning books. And a lot of them were written so technically. A lot of us financial planners, we shouldn't necessarily be writers. We should be working with the numbers.
Yeah.
But those three things that I just listed, one of the best things about all three of them, so those two books and the Dave Ramsey program, is it puts it in real life terms that anyone can understand. You do not have to be in the financial services industry to understand this. It's going to be put to you in very real terms. And I think that is so important.
Absolutely. Yeah. How should people, maybe research a certified financial planner or, find someone to help them?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like I said, you don't have to be a CFP to do what I do, but I do think it is very important. So when people are looking for a financial advisor, I'd always recommend that if it's not a financial planner that you're working with directly, that they at least have a CFP, a certified financial planner, on their team. And you can actually, if you Google CFP, you will go to the CFP board, again, because it's a national board. You will go to their website and you can look for CFPs in your area. One of the most impactful things I find is word of mouth. I mean, you can Google people, but when you're talking about people's money and their retirement, that is oftentimes such an emotion. There's such an emotional attachment to that because it is so hugely important. So a lot of times a warm introduction is nice. So, ask your friends who they work with and then get those names, get those recommendations, and then do your research from there. But certainly, like I said, that looking for those CFP marks, obviously I'm a little bit biased, but I do think it is important.
Okay. Thank you. What does it cost? I guess some people would have no idea, like what does it cost to use someone? And then what would you say are the benefits of using someone than yourself just trying to do it on your own?
Yeah. So talking about cost first. So there's a few different ways it can be structured. So oftentimes when you're working with an advisor, how that advisor is paid, how their team is paid, is they're managing your assets. So say you have a large IRA or you have an IRA of any size, and you want to have an IRA, individual retirement account, which is an investment account designated for retirement. You want to have that professionally managed. The world of asset management, they're going to charge a fee for management. It's an annual fee that is deducted typically quarterly from your account. That fee, in most cases, should cover financial planning as well, financial retirement planning. So that should give you access to a financial plan and a financial planner. Then there are folks who just want to get a plan done for them. They don't want to manage their they don't want to have their assets professionally managed. They want to manage on their own, but they want a kind of a roadmap. Oftentimes you can go to an advisor and pay a flat fee for a plan to be done. Those fees can range. I mean, they kind of are all over the spectrum. I've seen them as low as $1,500. I've seen them as high as $3,500 to $4,500. Oftentimes it depends on the complexity of the case as well. So there's kind of two ways that you can get access to it. Another thing that I don't think a lot of people think about or are necessarily aware of, like I mentioned, I work as an advisor to 401k plans. I offer all of the participants in the plans that I sit as advisor to a free comprehensive financial plan. So oftentimes, as an employee who's contributing to a retirement plan, you might not necessarily know it, but there is most likely an advisor sitting on your plan. Ask to get in contact with that advisor. See what sort of financial planning services they might offer you completely for free. Oftentimes people don't do a good job of advertising that. So definitely check there for sure.
Those are all really helpful. Yeah, I don't think I realized that either. I didn't know that was, something offered through the employer.
And not every advisor will offer it. But I certainly do with all of the plans that we have. I've heard of when I talk to participants, and I let them know. Some of them will say, oh yeah, the last advisor to my plan did that. There's not necessarily a good way of marketing it. So a lot of times it's not even advertised. So, you know, if you are an employee of a company and you're participating in a plan and you're listening, ask your HR person to get in contact with the advisor. Like I said, most plans have advisors. So if you go seek that information out, maybe it's not something that they're even necessarily advertising, but they might do it if you ask.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I certainly see it.
Okay. Very, very, very good. Okay. And then I like to ask people, what life advice do you have to share?
Oh gosh. Yeah. You know, that is and not necessarily pertaining to financial planning.
Right.
Okay. So my life advice would be, and you know, it kind of goes hand in hand with what I do every day, but spend as much time with your family. It really is like I feel like, obviously I'm very blessed to have a very close relationship with mine. I see them all every single day. We all work together. But I feel like you'll never regret it. You'll never regret spending as much time, and you never know, you know, how long you're going to have with someone, how long you're going to have with your parents. And I mean, they're such important influences on my life personally and in my friends' lives. I cannot underscore, you know, the importance of family and leaning on those people.
Thank you. And then I like to ask, what do you feel humanity needs to work on to make our world a better place?
Oh gosh. I mean, I can think of what I try to, what I'm trying to mentally, ingrain in my child. He's a little young for it, but we're trying to build the fundamental building blocks of that. And I think it really should be one of the most important thing that we're all taught is kind of the golden rule, right? You do unto others what you would like done to yourself. And I think that the respect for others, the respect for the environment, I mean, it all goes hand in hand. And I would say that personally, that's one of the most important things that I want to teach my son. And so I think it would benefit all of humanity.
I like that a lot. Yeah, thank you. How would people get in touch with you, Kristen?
Yeah, I'm very responsive over email. So my email address, my last name is a doozy. So do you want me to list it out?
Why not?
Okay. So my email address is Kristen.vandebossche. So Kristen, Kristen, Vande Bossche, that's BANDEBOSSCHE @N as in Nancy, M as in Mary.com. Or you can always call me at 949-863-5896. I'm very responsive. I'm always at the office.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to teach us about certified financial planning and, you know, all the things that go into it. And I'm sure people are going to learn. I learned even some things that I wasn't aware of. So I thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is really fun to talk about it.
Oh, good. Yeah, wonderful.